Hello, how are you? In this month's Cloud State of Play, we have another three interesting topics for you. VMware, the king of virtualization, is dead. The IT Outlook Report 2024, and the Post Office / Fujitsu scandal. So if you're interested in hearing about those, stay tuned. Hello and welcome to the Cloud Therapist channel. My name is Richard Simon. I am the Cloud Therapist. This is the February 2024 episode of Cloud State of Play. As always, I have with me the radiant Paul Bevan. Paul is the Director of Infrastructure at Law Research, and yeah, he's back for another month. How are you doing, Paul?
I'm very well, thank you. I love the radiant piece. Maybe I ought to just move like that and have the whole sort of halo effect over me. But yeah, that would be good. But no, I'm good, thank you, Richard. How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm good, thank you. And yeah, I have to confess, so I asked Microsoft Copilot for some nice words to say about somebody that's kind of, that you like and that you admire. And it gave me a whole list of them. So expect in the next few episodes that I'll be replacing that word with some other ones, and we'll see what your reaction is going to be.
I reserve the right to run my own version of Copilot to see what the funny responses to that should be. Like,
Yes.
go on, this is just, yeah.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Okay, so yeah, we'll see what your reaction is going to be for next month's one and beyond that. But
Oh, I
anyway,
know you're using Copilot. I shall have a look at this.
yeah, you should do. You should do. Right. Okay. So as always, we have our three topics for discussion, and this month we have chosen. First one is VMware. So the king of virtualization is dead. We're not actually saying is the king of virtualization, we're actually declaring, which is quite bold of us, that the king of virtualization is dead. So that's going to be a topic of discussion today, and kind of the Broadcom acquisition and so on. The second was an interesting report, although slightly maybe not as detailed as we kind of maybe expected. It's called the IT Outlook Report 2024. It's by Dell, VMware, and Rackspace. So we'll look at some of the stats for that and discuss the contents of that. And the third one is slightly closer to home, which is the ongoing Post Office and Fujitsu scandal. So in the UK, there has been this issue that's been going on for a number of years, and we'll try and sort of go through some details on that and discuss the event itself and try and explain really what's happened to that. But because it was kind of IT related, I thought it would be an interesting one to actually go through. Okay, so Paul, let's kick off with the first one around VMware and Broadcom's acquisition of VMware. Now, we've covered this a couple of times in the past. I think the first time when it was announced, we covered it in the December 2022 edition of Cloud State of Play. So that's going back some time. And then we also mentioned again when the acquisition actually closed. When it was completed by Broadcom. So we mentioned it in the December 2023 episode of Cloud State of Play as well. So I'll try and include some links on that for our audience. But I think, we've kind of, mentioned this a number of times, and we've kind of had, fairly good coverage over it. Recently, there's been some decisions after the acquisition closed by Broadcom. There's been some decisions that have been made by Broadcom. So, yeah, there was a number of those. I think the initial one was, over 2,800 employees from VMware were made redundant. I know some of them actually turned up at HashiCorp for some strange reason. There seemed to be like a mini community that kicked off there. You also, I think, picked up on the fact that I think Broadcom had asked VMware staff to actually return to the office. So that was quite interesting. And VMware, or rather Broadcom dissolved all of the VMware partnerships. Now, I think this was the big one that really kind of sent the shockwaves around this sort of the VMware sort of ecosystem and the VMware partnership. So they actually dissolved all of the VMware partnerships and asked everybody to reapply, but to actually reapply on Broadcom terms. And some of the cloud service providers were only asked, to come back by invitation only. So that was quite interesting. And there's been other ones as well, like the recent deprecation of the free version of the ESXi hypervisor, again by Broadcom. So that's been terminated, or end of life has been announced on that.
Yeah, we've had some other interesting ones recently too, which I think is all part of the same trend and the same pattern.
It's like an ongoing saga, isn't it?
An ongoing saga, of trying to move everybody to their subscription versions rather than having perpetual licenses.
Yeah.
And okay, it's a little difficult to shift everybody off perpetual licenses if they really don't want to move, unless of course you terminate any support, which is what they're doing.
Yeah, they are doing.
And you think they are really, they're very aggressive. I think that's the overall, underlying sort of theme that comes through, is this sort of aggressive move to get rid of anything they don't want, to get the cost rationalization done as fast as possible. But they seem to have done it in such a way as to annoy just about every constituency VMware ever had. So I think, I think in our previous chats, we sort of said, look, culturally, this could be very difficult. And I think that's what's happening.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also, like I said, the shockwave, I think that's occurred has, been quite far spread as well. So you've got to the point where people are actually, in certain quarters are starting to speculate about the future of vSphere itself.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's going to be sort of open field for a lot of the competitors. I mean, Nutanix must be sort of rubbing their hands with glee and going, yeah, oh, let's get in there. And there will be all sorts of targeted campaigns from anybody who's got a competitive offering that will help VMware customers transition into a, maybe a more open or a less aggressive fit. So I think, it's a dangerous time for the VMware brand, if you like, if we can call it that, because it's VMware by Broadcom these days.
Yes.
And you can think how long before that disappears completely. I mean, I think I said it when it first happened. I fear because of the very different cultures, and I think that's what we're starting to see.
Yeah, and also, I mean, like I said, some of the speculation around it was, kind of, okay, so what are we? I mean, somebody outright just said, what are we going to replace vSphere with? And to my surprise, which is quite bizarre, he didn't actually mention public cloud. He mentioned everything else under the sun, hyperconverged with Nutanix, and even went as far as OpenStack and various other things, but actually failed to say, well, maybe actually this is a good chance, this is a good opportunity for CIOs and CTOs to get a little bit more budget and actually start thinking about migrating to cloud instead. So I was really, I mean, but that type of news is certainly starting to come up.
But again, I think what you're seeing is people have made a huge investment in the VMware environment. They've made a huge investment in virtualization, and and VMware were trying to give them a route to a more container-oriented future, albeit with their own flavor, and trying to keep them as locked into the VMware environment as they could. But you're talking about going to the public cloud. There's no reason why they can't use a whole bunch of new tools to give themselves a cloud-like experience on-prem, in a private cloud or in a hybrid cloud. You don't necessarily need to put everything into the public cloud. I mean, you and I have sort of sometimes minor, sometimes less than minor disagreements about that. But I think the argument is, most people who have VMware installations will be looking and saying, what's my route to the future?
Mm.
And probably, the way in which Broadcom are behaving, an awful lot of them will be trying to find ways of getting out from under that particular rock.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I think I mean, I think for me it's, it's not anything in between, and we've talked about sort of that sort of interim IT sort of stage, and that's kind of where, you know some of these organizations may be forced to go, and some of them will just sweat the assets basically as much as they can and kind of keep the costs to a minimum. Although I'm sure that Broadcom's recent price changes and so on are probably going to make that difficult. So the CFOs will be starting to scream fairly soon in regards to that. But I think the issue has been that, as far as I'm aware, not many people have kind of adopted Tanzu, which is what you mentioned earlier about the containerization and orchestration option that VMware provided, and not many of them have gone to VMC, the VMware Cloud, which is the vSphere on the other side of the fence, so to speak, with the public cloud providers.
Oh no, I mean, I think that's been almost like a red herring. I mean, I know they sold off vCloud Air to OVH Cloud years ago.
Yeah.
And that went nowhere. As soon as it had gone, I mean, VMware were almost as bad as Broadcom in the sense that they sold it off, and yes, we're going to support it, and yes, we're going to help you market it, and then promptly didn't. So it died, and it withered on the vine. And I think a number of these things will wither on the vine. There was previously there've been statements from Broadcom, where they're quite clearly detaching themselves from the small and medium-sized enterprise market and focusing on major enterprises. Surprise, surprise, because those guys find it a lot harder to move quickly away from their VMware environments because it's a difficult transition. Well, not difficult, it's just a large transition. And therefore the likelihood is they'll be around for some time. There was some optimistic thoughts early on in the process when you're looking at a number of the commentators and analysts were sort of saying, well, you can see the logic of what, the Broadcom acquisition, but the reality appears to be much more of using it as a cash cow. It's really strange. They're not trying to see how they can provide a competitive environment to the sort of cloud networking, vendors that are out there now and starting to be very innovative in the way we handle the whole sort of networking piece. I mean, Broadcom's got a big interest in networking, and yes, having a software capability in that should be interesting, but that it just seems to be their whole approach is so aggressive. They're just going to run out of customers eventually. They'll get a smaller and smaller group of large customers still using VMware, probably unhappy with the licensing terms and trying to find out how they get out as quickly as possible.
And Paul, don't you think that Broadcom is a bit of a strange partner for VMware anyway?
Well, there's a certain amount of logic to it in the sense that as you get a sort of software-defined world coming to networking more and more, there's the pressure on Broadcom will come from the fact that they are very much a hardware provider. And therefore there was a sort of mad logic to it. It says, actually, we need the ability to
There's
have
method in the madness somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you looked at the sort of both the financial and industry analysts' take on it, when it was first announced, it wasn't all negative. People were saying, "Oh yeah, absolutely," but my take was always the culture's wrong. Culture between
culturally, yeah, I agree.
It's going to be a real problem. You're effectively taking a bunch of hardware engineers and product people and saying, now deal with all these software types, and we've known, looking at all the other areas of DevOps and SecOps and all the where those two areas come together, quite often you get very, very different cultures. Now layer on top of that a pretty aggressive sort of cost and sales approach that you get from Broadcom, and also one that's used to selling lots of things in volume rather than this sort of integrated, systems integration, large scale sort of development projects. The whole two worlds coming together was always going to be problematic, I think. But as I say, there was an element of, it makes sense, but only at the sense that, Broadcom probably needed a software partner.
Yeah. So we'll come back to the Nutanix, because there was a couple of things that they have reacted to, obviously, because I mean, clearly the industry's seen this and kind of, it's a shot on the arm for Nutanix, all these decisions by Broadcom. I don't know if kind of Broadcom has really understood that or not, but we'll come back to that point. The other point, and we kind of discussed, okay, so what are the alternatives, and we said maybe, and I think, like I said, there is a couple. I'll try and include the links for those posts that came out on LinkedIn that I picked up on, because I actually made some comments on them as well myself. So those were also quite interesting. But the other point I wanted to really just pick up with you very quickly, and let's not kind of dwell on it too long, but just kind of want to get your opinion on, hasn't been the writing, has the writing not been on the wall for some time? If you kind of consider VMware's history of the last sort of 5 to 8 years, with their sort of sudden panic of all the acquisitions they made in 2017, 2018, 2019, Carbon Black, AVI Networks, Bitnami, Heptio, which I was part of, and then they moved me into VMware, and I quit within 2 weeks of joining VMware, or being integrated into VMware, because that's not what I signed up for. And sort of the whole VMC partnerships with with the big three public cloud providers, hasn't that kind of all been writing on the wall for VMware?
Yeah, they always seem to have been in reaction mode rather than proactive. How the heck are we going to develop into this new cloud world, this new era of containers, the new era of microservices, all those. And it's been very much a defensive, what other bits can I wrap around to keep people interested in what we're doing?
Yeah.
Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but as often as not, it doesn't, because they tend to destroy the value of the companies they buy. And that's...
Yeah, and I think it was, as you said, you're right, and I think we probably even mentioned it before, that all of these things were knee-jerk reactions to the market kind of moving away from what they were doing, and then, as you said, them being sort of reactive to the hemorrhaging of customers, because they were hemorrhaging a lot of customers when that whole sort of containerization and Kubernetes thing sort of really took off.
Yeah, I mean, it's cyclical within the industry. I mean, I've always sort of loved is probably the wrong word, but fascinated by the sort of rise and fall of companies, and how much more quickly it happens these days than perhaps it did in olden times, as it were. If you look at when I came into the industry, the names there, and how many of those have disappeared, and how many of them just didn't see, they were product oriented, not market oriented. They really were, I've got the greatest product in the world, and it's sort of, it's the Betamax story all over again. You got a great product, but actually the market moved and you never saw it coming.
Right. Okay. So so on Nutanix, predictions, they actually came up with a couple of things. So one thing was their predictions on VMware. So it said most VMware customers will pay more, which they have. Channel partners will reduce VMware investments. I think it's not just the partners, but also the CSPs as well, that have kind of built their cloud around vSphere and what have you. They said expect Dell, HPE, and Lenovo to similarly reduce their VMware investments. Yeah. I think that's inevitable. The EUC, so that's end user computing aspect, will probably be more open, which is correct, because they have sold off. Broadcom's actually sold off that part of the VDI business, or the EUC business of VMware. So yes, that has been divested. And then customers may change their sort of strategy and whatever. And I thought that was a bit of a duh moment, because people are already talking about that. And as to kind of where they go, I don't know, maybe we kind of differ on that. My thing is, this is a good opportunity for customers to push into public cloud, not repeat the same mistake with, in my opinion, with Nutanix or anything else. I mean, God forbid we kind of start talking about an OpenStack again or something like that.
Yeah, but again, just to come back to that, I agree with you, half agree with you, in the sense that companies should be looking at the latest technologies that enable you to, containerize, do microservices. You want to build your own cloud, fine, but don't do it, necessarily in a route that's going to sort of lock you into a particular technology moving forward or a particular style. They've got their benefits. I mean, I've met companies who are delighted with HCI, absolutely, because it's better than what they had before.
Oh, yeah.
Well, is it better than what you could have? Don't know. I mean, you will say, oh, it's not better than what it could have, but yeah, for them, they've made that first step. But it's fundamentally getting their arms around the latest technologies. Yeah. And if you want to run that in the public cloud, fine. If you want to run it in a private cloud, fine.
Yeah. Yeah. And also I think, I mean, I won't go through it. I'll include again links in the description of the video. But Nutanix came up with, obviously, a very probably hurried and rushed kind of put together set of steps to migrate from VMware to Nutanix. So if you're ever thinking of that, Mr. VMware customer, well, we will welcome you with open arms. And there was a whole bunch of steps there, which included kind of equating their technologies, the equivalent technologies and features list to VMware's and things like that as well. So that was quite interesting.
It would be really interesting to find customers who've moved from VMware to Nutanix. It really would be fascinating.
Yeah, I'd love to see that. I would love to see that.
How realistic were Nutanix in their, here's the easy steps to come across, if it does turn out to be really easy and Nutanix have the marketing now so how to push that, then they could have quite a nice little business for a while.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is, good luck to Nutanix. I think this is definitely an opportunity for them, and they should be, capitalizing on it. As much as I would maybe disagree with, with that as a strategic move for enterprises, but at the same time, I think it's a huge opportunity for, global system integrators like ourselves to be kind of saying, hey, you really need to be looking at this as a, as a cloud strategy, as a migration strategy to cloud. So I think that's definitely what, with Broadcom's actions, acquisition first, and now their actions towards VMware and that whole ecosystem. I think that's that's the opportunity that's been created.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So last point on here, which is quite funny, was when things are starting to make sense, when even your spam starts to actually make sense. So I got an email on my business account the other day, and it said, have you thought about the Broadcom VMware acquisition? Are you thinking about migrating from from vSphere? And if you are, we are a blah 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 and whatever they were. I didn't read the rest of it, but just that headline was quite funny, and our email system detected it as a spam email. So it was quite funny that I was saying internally, joking with some colleagues, that even my spam is now beginning to make sense as far as the Broadcom and VMware acquisition is concerned. So yeah, maybe that is the final kind of sign of when you need to really kind of start doing something and move on.
I like that. Yeah, good.
Okay, right. So let's move on to our second topic, which was the IT Outlook report 2024 by Dell, VMware, and Rackspace. Now, I had some very funny names for all of these three players, which I think I emailed you. I've forgotten to copy it onto what I'm looking at the moment in terms of our notes. I will forego that for now. Maybe I'll dig it up while you're talking.
I'm not sure we could broadcast them before the
I can.
Before the 9 o'clock watershed.
Yeah. Yeah. exactly. Okay, I might include it in the description of the videos that are.
I won't say you're a ranter, but you do have a good go every now and again.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. That's the whole point of Class State of Play, is for us to run, definitely. So yes, I might actually include that in the description of the video for our lovely audience. Okay, so I picked up a number of things in this report, but I think you felt kind of it was a bit underwhelming overall. Was that your conclusion?
Yeah, very underwhelming. I mean, it didn't really tell us anything we probably don't already know. But there were too many holes in the report as well. You know, when you looked at, you know, they're sort of the people they'd actually gone to and asked for their comments. They'd sort of spread themselves very thinly across the globe, included some very strange geographies. You know, and you think, why Mexico? You know,
Right.
okay, why Singapore over, you know, Indonesia, for example? No Japan. No,
Japan. Yeah.
Australia had a big, you know, an equal ranking with the United States and, you know, UK and Germany. And you think, yeah, I mean, I love the Aussies to bits, but you know, it's a smaller economy overall.
Yeah.
They do very innovative things. Don't get me wrong, but I mean, so it felt as though they'd gone to places where they already, you know, had supporters they could go and talk to. So it felt a little like that. The other was that there were so many non sequiturs in there. For example, there was one glorious chart that had, you know, how the various elements of public cloud, private cloud, data center, enterprise data center, and co-location were going to, you know, go in the next 2 to 3 years. And public cloud was the same, you know, over the 3 years, and no growth. Co-location was down. Enterprise data centers was down, and surprise, surprise, hybrid cloud was up, you know, by X number of percentage points.
Yeah.
To which my immediate thought was, well, if you're saying public cloud's not going to grow anymore, and co-location's going downhill, and enterprise data centers going downhill, where the heck are you going to run this extra workload?
Yeah.
This hybrid cloud workload.
Yeah.
And so there were things like that you just thought, well, that was silly. I mean, you know, somebody must.
Yeah.
Nobody was really checking the sort of logic of some of the charts. So,
yeah, I think yeah, you're right, because I mean, hybrid cloud runs in, you know, at least your data center, if not in a managed or colo sort of space, as well as the public cloud. You know, that's all. That is the definition of hybrid cloud. So if those are down, then how is hybrid cloud going up then?
Exactly. You know, there were silly things like that, and just things that they sort of got their knickers in a twist about. You know, there was obviously they seem to be willfully blind on the sort of 63% growth in investment. In technology that was going on, and they kept talking about reprioritization and, you know, effectively trying to say, actually, people are coming back to hybrid cloud, and you're going, yeah, but actually, if you look at the detail of the report, only 11% of respondents said they were reprioritizing their budgets. But they made this big thing about, actually, it's all about reprioritization.
Yes.
The actual answers don't, you know, in the report don't back that up. So again, somebody was writing something from a let's promote hybrid cloud, let's promote our wares point of view, and just willfully ignored the answers coming back from the audience, which was very strange. So you know, yes, it was a little bit underwhelming, and just some of the things they left out. There was no mention of telco.
Oh, okay. Maybe they didn't. Yeah, they didn't bother surveying them. Well, they didn't want to be surveyed. Telcos didn't want to be surveyed.
Well, you know, but again, you can go, how good is the relationship between those players and the telcos? You know, and therefore they weren't going to get the answers they expected, or was it too difficult? But it's a glaring omission in a cloud world and a cloud network world that one of your main groups that you're asking for question is telco, and you don't ask any of them.
Agreed. And on the investment in cloud, I picked up, they said, I think edge computing. So quite funny that they said investment in cloud, and then they counted edge computing as part of that. I would obviously call it an edge cloud rather than edge computing. Edge computing is kind of a little bit broader. But anyway, they said edge computing, 4% growth, private cloud, 4% growth,
Yeah.
and public cloud, 0.5% growth. Now, in terms of percentages, yes, that does look lower on public cloud, but the actual numbers would be, significantly more, because obviously we know that people are spending billions, in public cloud, and we're not seeing any, slowdown in that. And AWS and others are still reporting obscene quarterly profits and so on.
And because an awful lot of the public cloud growth is coming from new business ventures, new startups, new areas.
Yeah.
And I just suspect that with the mindset of both the people who are putting this together and the agency they used would be to go to talk to CIOs and CTOs or whatever in existing businesses.
Established,
who've got a whole heap of other things to deal with, that says public cloud is just one of them. Whereas actually there's a whole host of businesses and business models appearing because of the cloud that's driving that growth. And telco is one of the big ones. You think, well, of course you're not going to get an answer on telco if you haven't included the telcos.
I thought it was quite interesting that I think in one of the summaries they said there's a lot of, and quote unquote, political polarization. And at that point, I just thought, why is the report turning into kind of a woke social commentary and going non-IT all of a sudden? Hang on, somebody copy and paste the wrong information into this infographic, and I thought that was a bit weird.
Show their sort of creds in terms of ESG and what was happening in the wider political world, because from
it's an election year everywhere, isn't it? So.
But in terms of geopolitics, and we're not going to get into that, but there's a lot of uncertainty, which tends to affect investment. But then you look at where people are investing, and they're investing heavily in technology at the moment, in the light of what's been happening and the changes that they're facing. So yes, there is some underlying concerns about growth in the global economy. But actually we're not seeing an awful lot of that as people come out of the pandemic and recessions that we've had in the past.
And my conclusion to it really is that it is a rather academic report, apart from those glaring sort of omissions, I think, in certain areas where there's the focus in terms of the compute resources and where, or rather workloads would go, or as you said, in terms of whole sectors not being surveyed. I think overall it was quite academic for me. It mentioned things like, so economic uncertainty will kind of cause job displacement. There's a skilled staff shortages, so that's still a challenge. 44% of respondents said there was lack of in-house expertise. Yes, we know that, but that's why the lacks of kind of global system integrators are there, and those kind of consulting partners are there to really help with that. I don't think any organization is under the illusion that they can do everything themselves. So a lot of it I found was kind of academic. It's kind of, we know this already. So what is the new thing that you're trying to actually bring into this?
The one thing they really didn't bring out, and you mentioned it almost in passing as a sort of plug for your company, was this idea that systems integrators, but also the VARs, the ISVs, and everybody out there has got a tremendous opportunity, because they've got staff who are tech savvy. Let's face it, and most enterprises are short of that. As you say, the moment, we know it's a problem, and yet one of the responses from the audience was, no, we haven't got enough staff to do this, but actually, no, we're not really using systems integrators either. I was quite surprised at the low number that were saying, yes, we're using third parties of some variety to help fill that gap. And I was quite surprised. So, you think, are there a whole bunch of enterprises out there going, oh, whoa, we can't get the staff, and oh, whoa, there's nobody out there to help me? Or is it, oh, well, we can't get the staff, and I don't really understand what an integrator can do for me? In which case, are the integrators, are the ISP, the independent software vendors, our old VAR resellers, in their audience, doing enough to show how they are relevant and how they can help their customer base this new world? And I have to say that, the big system integrators are pushing really hard, but there's a sort of mid-market of tech resource and tech companies, in terms of VARs, ISVs, all those that don't seem to be getting the message across that we can really help you.
Yeah, I do agree with that. I think that's underwhelming at the moment. And then the other aspect that was kind of around the AI and sustainability, and it said, there's growing optimism for the reliance on AI. Wrong. I don't think that's right. I think, if you look at the continent, everybody's, doubling down even more, with the EU AI Act and, data sovereignty and things like that becoming even more of a critical thing. The US kind of getting not paranoid, but taking certain steps, right or wrong, depending on which side of the fence you're on, in terms of limiting, the sale of AI accelerators, to places like China and Iran and stuff like that, as well. So likes of NVIDIA and so on, all their wings being clipped really, around that. So I don't think it's optimism in certain quarters. And certainly in the innovation aspect of it, I agree with that. There's lots of people who are kind of doing that. But it said AI implementation is for innovation. Yes, okay. So we just said we agree with that. It's for decision making and product enhancement. And again, nothing really spectacularly different and stellar in that, or nothing nothing revelatory in a lot of those results.
No, I absolutely agree. But they were sort of trying to sort of big up some of the the potential use of AI. I wonder why, because obviously, Dell particularly is going to have, quite is making quite a play for that big AI market. But again, it just highlighted the fact that there are certain use cases around, product enhancement, around analytics, around, that where AI is already playing a part, and a lot of AI is being done in areas like research. Really, and the audience they were talking to was pretty much an enterprise audience, not a research audience.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the kind of the sustainability coming in, off the back of that, I think we have mentioned this before. I think it's not going to be possible for people to kind of say, let's do loads of AI stuff, and at the same time we do sustainability, and we do it all ourselves.
I think I had a little rant back to you when we were sort of setting this particular session up, saying, this thing about the growth of AI and how it's going to help with sustainability. And I said it's a race between how quickly can AI work out the best way for us to reduce our carbon emissions before we have to use so much GPU power that we frazzle the planet anyway. It's that sort of race. It says, oh, great, AI will tell us how best to reduce carbon emissions because it's going to be so good at deciding what's the best way forward. We'll have burnt up so much fossil fuel trying to power GPU. At what point? It's a race. It's that sort of, they'll meet in the middle. And just at the point that the Earth explodes, the AI will go, oh, you need to do this, this, and this, and it'll be fine. Too late. It's that
exactly.
I think there's, again, background to, and this may be a topic for another time, which is, how genuine is what people are saying about sustainability at the moment.
I agree. And I completely agree with you in terms of, by the time AI has worked it out, we'd have spent so much power and energy trying to get there, they'll be too late to actually implement,
Yeah.
that discovery that AI or that solution that AI comes up with. So yeah, and this is what I'm saying. For kind of people are, I mean, last year for the majority of it, I think it changed a little bit towards the end and certainly early this year. But last year, sustainability completely disappeared from the table. I mean, everybody was just talking about AI. 2023, and as I've quoted you in my article as well, AI was kind of the topic, right? So, and everybody just kind of left, sustainability to one side, and then all the announcements, around hyperscale data centers that are dedicated to, to AI workloads, by the likes of Microsoft and Amazon and so on, at all their conferences late last year. I mean, all of that just kind of means, okay, so how are you going to do sustainability now? And then you turn that to to enterprises, how their companies are, how they're going to do that. That's even worse, I think, in terms of how they can achieve
It
that.
is. It's a much broader topic because I mean, everybody's played the figures and they've used statistics to try and prove that they're going to be more energy efficient and greener. And the reality is, we're using so much power. How do we ameliorate that? And the whole supply chain of all the various elements that go to make up your carbon footprint are not understood by most companies.
Indeed, indeed. Okay, so that is the IT Outlook Report 2024 by Dell, VMware, and Rackspace. We'll include some links about that in the description of the video. Right, so let's move on to our third topic, which is the UK Post Office scandal. Now, this is a huge topic, and it's been going on for, I think, literally decades. But it's kind of come to a head recently. And although it's quite local to kind of the UK, it still has a massive, or one of the major culprits in it is the IT element of this news story. And obviously it's had a huge impact on the people who've worked for the post office organization, both personally and kind of their livelihood, and even in some cases, unfortunately, that people have been driven to so much despair because of the accusations that were made against them, that they've actually taken their own lives as well, which I believe is has happened to a few of those folks, which is very tragic indeed. So putting aside kind of the consequences and all that, there has been inquiries from the government around this, and I think that happened, was it late last year, early this year, when those inquiries started, Paul? Is that correct?
Oh, they've been running for quite some time. I mean, there've been a number, but the latest one I think has been running for, I probably find it's coming over a year. I mean, it's one of the huge inquiries that's just going to go on and on and on and rumble on and on. I think you can get a bit sort of cynical about the amount of money being spent on lawyers who are having an absolute field day, but we need to get to the bottom of it.
Absolutely, definitely. And I think that the people who are accused need to have their sort of their justice.
Yes, that needs to be resolved without any further delay. Just get on and do it, guys.
Okay, so so just to kind of give a gist of it to the audience in terms of the story itself. So what happened was a number of sub post office masters and mistresses, as they're called. So these people actually work in the post offices locations all around the country. The post office is it a private company now, the PO?
Well, no, it's still, I think the government is still the major shareholder.
Okay.
They've split it up into bits, some of which have been given a level of independence to try and deal with the local parcels carriers that come along. And other bits of it that are still very much, I mean, it's basically got a government warrant or a royal warrant to deliver post. There is a legal requirement for
commission to do that.
So it's not a competitive environment in that sense. Having said that, of course, and actually the post office did block one of the parcel carriers from actually providing a postal service.
Right. Okay.
So I mean, but yeah, you still need to think about it as a publicly owned organization. Sorry, a government owned organization.
Government.
We use
Okay.
the term public in the UK to say government, but it's effectively government run.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So okay. So that's kind of the post office entity. Now, what's happened is that they've been using a piece of software called Horizon. Horizon is developed by Fujitsu, is my understanding, and I presume this kind of, I don't know the sort of the details of the architecture of it, but it's kind of one of those sort of back-end systems that records all of your transactions and things like that. Is that correct?
Oh,
Near that?
No, I've sort of delved into it, and I've got a corner of me is slightly interested because the company I worked for at the time, when this was being first put out to tender, was Unisys, and Unisys became second in the bidding.
Okay.
Huge tender. I wasn't on the team at all, but we were aware of what was going on. No, I mean, it started out when it was still ICL, before Fujitsu bought ICL. Now, ICL was one of, it was a British computer company. It was a major supplier of IT systems, mostly mainframes, to the British government. And, they suffered as most of the mainframe people did, who, IBM survived, one or two others just about surviving, but ICL was bought by Fujitsu after they'd won the contract.
Okay. Yeah.
So ICL won the contract originally to deliver basically a system of giving everybody who was on benefits almost like a credit card, and using a credit card for them to take their. They ran into real problems trying to get that one up and running, and then thought, well, we've just given this huge contract out. What can we use it for? Let's use it to modernize the branch network.
Okay.
And
that's when it came in. Okay.
And the links to the back office system.
Yeah.
So actually, it is a distributed system that has a branch element and a back office element.
Yeah.
And boy, they didn't understand how to build it.
Yeah.
I
mean, I think it's quite similar to a project I worked for on at Sainsbury's. So it's kind of a picking up all the the supermarket sort of transactions and anything that was going on there, and then kind of shunting that back to HQ at some point. I think that was part of the process. Okay, so what's happened is, the point is that what's happened with that is that that system has had some bugs in it, so to speak, and those bugs have meant that certain figures that are coming in from all of these post office branches seem inaccurate, or they kind of don't tally up with what the post office sort of HQ is probably expecting those, the cost of those or the value of those transactions. And then that's meant that the sub postmasters and mistresses have actually been accused of stealing that the difference, and kind of skimming from transactions or whatever it is, or the benefits or the sales of things like stamps, presumably, or whatever else. I don't know the details, and I might be doing it injustice, but the point is that those people who've worked at those branches have actually been accused of stealing from the post office,
and prosecuted,
yeah, as well. So been
jail terms, some of them,
and given prison terms and things like that. So yeah, and that's obviously has caused huge trauma, because all these people were innocent. They obviously couldn't prove it. Some of the information has come out recently, I think, in the inquiries, that when did the post office knew about these bugs, and so on. And I think the leadership's kind of maybe been a little bit coy about that, and kind of said, oh, I don't know, I can't remember. Well, I'm not really sure. Things like that. A lot of the BBC reports were kind of talking about the boss of Fujitsu, Europe, saying, yeah, clearly we've kind of let society down, yes, and the sub postmasters, But then when we kind of being asked about the what do they call them, the beds, the bugs, errors, and defects. So they call that the short term for that is, or the acronym for that is beds. He said, I think it was Paul Patterson, is it the head of Fujitsu Europe? And he's kind of admitted to the beds, and he said that they have actually been with the Horizon software right from the very start. But then they said, okay, well, so when was that? And it was kind of, oh, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a response.
The system was flawed from day one. And it was, and I've some other commentator likened it to saying to people who had only ever played around with PCs from a sort of development and networking point of view, giving them a system that actually needed to have the sort of stability and capability of a mainframe. So things like just the acid test, the atomicity. Is it one? If you get an error, does it roll the whole thing back, or do you get partial happen? And it's one that was. It wasn't. If it was, you were talking about Sainsbury's. Sainsbury's used to do an overnight upload of everything that had happened in the branch during the day.
Yeah.
Okay, that's fine. And if the upload, if the upload fails, they'll run the upload again.
Yeah.
This was doing a level of online across the network and in branch, so in branch work and online before the days of really reliable networks from the branch upwards.
So it's kind of a real-time thing.
So semi-real in certain aspects, it was real time, and having to go back to the main system to get, but it was not. It didn't have the properties of an acid system, a proper atomicity, and all those sort of issues around online transaction processing. So if a network connection failed halfway through a transaction, let's say, and I won't get, we can make this too complicated, but the front end says, I've sold this stuff. The back end then says, yeah, but I never got the money for it because the network stopped at the time. Network comes back up. It doesn't know it had that problem.
Yeah.
Because it wasn't one out, all out. When you get a proper OLTP system, if you get a failure anywhere before the full transaction is completed, you get no transaction.
Right.
That didn't happen in this one. So they were doing partial transactions, and they knew about this quite early on. I mean, this is, and it's then you get cultural issues coming in.
Yeah.
I'm not going to own up to this. Oh, well, let's try and fix it. And and it got worse. And the bigger the hole they dug, the more they lied, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think this has been, a complete disaster. And then to allow the issue to be kind of point or allow the finger to be pointed at these innocent people, which I think to date only, I don't know the full number of how many actually were prosecuted, but only 93 of them of the wrongful convictions, according to the BBC report, I believe, said have actually been overturned, while thousands, there you go, are still waiting for compensation settlements. And this has been going on for more than 20 years, apparently. Yeah. So, I mean, for those who kind of accepted the prosecution, obviously those, kind of probably ended up at the back of the queue when it came to, trying to prove their innocence. But those obviously who stuck with it and fought through have obviously been now vindicated.
I think, to be fair, the government has tried to speed up things, and certainly the ones who were prosecuted and put in jail have had the whole thing quashed
since.
But getting the money actually has been more of an issue, and we can all wonder why, and there's all sorts of arguments as to why it's taken so long. But you really just want to turn around and say, no, just fix it. This is a one-off. No, because there's lawyers are all getting involved, saying if you create the precedent of just wiping all their debts out, all those sort of things, what happens in the future?
Yeah, and I mean, even Fujitsu have also said that they have a moral,
Oh yeah,
moral obligation to compensate
yeah,
post office victims. But
yeah.
Let's get on with it then.
Let's get on with it. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
So, but it is an interesting, public sector procurement, very difficult, which it has its own challenges. Very difficult architecture they tried to put together with teams of people who'd never really been involved in that sort of environment. It's really
so there is a technical, I think, sort of architecture design element to it. But I mean, just on the piece around, I mean, that technical piece, there's a lot of kind of distributed systems, so it's not like it cannot be done. It's just maybe you just had the wrong people who couldn't really do it, and as you said, they were inexperienced.
When they started, 1996, 97.
Yeah.
The
dial-up modems. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
56K was as fast as you could go.
And you had most places used sort of dumb terminals to communicate with mainframes at the back end. Yeah. If you had distributed systems, by and large, they weren't trying to communicate in anywhere near real time with a back end system.
No.
And so here you've got ones, right, let's go down this particular route. And you think, with people who, so you're using technology that's not proven with people who've never had to try to do that in the past, and there were so many places that could go wrong. Yeah. And then the public sector culture of, cover your backsides kicked in, and you get this disaster. It's awful, but there is elements of, we need to learn from it. You're right, distributed systems now shouldn't be an issue.
Yeah, and also when you start having when you start kind of seeing that there is there's now that many people being accused. I mean, it's surely the post office and the leadership there must have kind of appreciated that surely we can't have that many crooked people working for us. What's the thing when they say when it's, once it's an accident, twice it's a coincidence, 3 times a pattern.
Yeah.
Right? You've gone way beyond 3, right? You've had thousands of this stuff happening. So why didn't you say, hang on, there's a pattern going on here. Surely it cannot be. And normally people, find a few people here and there of kind of, accused of stealing or, embezzlement or whatever it is within an organization. Sure. But that's like an infrequent, even in like massive, corporations that have like thousands and, of people, millions of people kind of working for them. It's not an everyday thing that happens. So when the post office kind of, came across it, they're not saying, well, hang on, do we really have that many people that are crooked working for us? This is like, abnormally big.
Unfortunately, you get this sort of, okay, what's the implication of us admitting this is, we got it wrong? And you see this over and over again in that people are going, I really don't want to have to make a decision that says I admit I was wrong, because it leaves us open to huge reparations. And but company boards do sometimes think like that. And it happens in the public sector more than we'd like to understand.
Well, I mean, evidently, I think the post office certainly have kind of seemed to have thought that. Considering, they've, like I said, there were some reports specifically that asked, well, when did you realize that the Horizon system was actually flawed and had, all these beds in it, so-called beds, the bugs and so on.
They lost the ability to say what's right and what's wrong.
Yeah. And
that's that ability as an organization.
Yeah. And I think that's a poor reflection of their character, really, and the people, all of the scruples of all the people who actually work there, from the kind of the IT teams and the developers at Fujitsu all the way to the board at the post office.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. I think we've kind of reached the top of the hour and top of our time. So we'll maybe just park it there for now. There is other elements, I think, which we might pick up on, which I again picked up on, which was around sort of how governments become, quote unquote, addicted to certain suppliers and contracts. And that has been a huge bugbear for me. And I'll maybe, go into, if I was the CTO of IT in the government, I'd do a Broadcom. I'd dissolve all of those partnerships overnight.
Yes.
So
If
anyway.
you want a sort of primer on public sector procurement, then I'm quite happy to get involved. I had a short period where I was heavily involved in that sort of stuff.
Right.
So everything you've just said, I'm going, yeah, I can probably give you some real insights from the early 1990s into that.
So that might be a topic we can pick up in the future. But I'll probably fast forward to the cutting off of the heads and dissolving everything. But anyway, okay. So thank you very much, Paul, again for all of your time and commentary. We appreciate your insights. We have a ton of links, I think, in this case. Hopefully they'll all be there by the time you watch this, in the description of the video. So do check out the details there. So thanks all for watching. Hope you find it interesting. Please do make some comments if you find any of this stuff interesting. Also, if you have any other reports and kind of stuff and topics that you're interested in, please let me know in the comments of the video. That would be really appreciated. And I'll see if I can pick those up for a future episode and for Paul and I to have a conversation about them. Thank you all very much, and we'll see you next time.
Bye.
Thank you for watching this talk. Please consider subscribing to support the channel. See you next time.